Welcome to What Do You Say, the podcast that peels back the layers of remarkable individuals to reveal their extraordinary sides and their incredible lives. I'm your host, Frank Termini, and I'm absolutely thrilled to embark on this journey with you. The podcast name's What Do You Say, but that's not how it's said.
How do you say it?
We say.
What do you say?
We say.
What do you say?
We say.
What do you say?
You got it. We say.
Hey.
All right, guys, welcome back to What Do You Say? I'm your host, Frank Termini. We do not have Andrew today. Andrew is busy saving lives. He, as the captain of the, as a captain in the fire department, he had to bail out on us today. So, if you're liking what we're doing, just please like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you can be updated on any new content. So today I have someone very near and dear to my heart. I've been wanting to get you on here for a long time. Someone who's mentored me in life, mentored me on the mat, mentored me as a husband, as a father. Jesse Hernandez, football player, went to Pius, graduated from Pius, went to Jewel, right?
Yep.
Ward number 33.
Yep.
Fullback.
Yep.
Back in the days when fullbacks just had to just be a big body, and then transitioned into the martial arts world. Has a black belt in judo, a black belt in jiu-jitsu under Dustin Dennis. Only one of two people that Dustin.
He's expanded it now. He's got more, but I was a second black belt.
Who was one? Was it Pirate?
A guy out of Hawaii.
Okay, all right.
A guy out of Hawaii.
Okay.
Who has been with him a long time.
Right. Well, here, one thing that I really want to get into initially was, and you had given me kind of this 30,000 square foot view, right? When you were breaking down the Harrison Buckner podcast from a communications standpoint. And you were giving me some really good feedback. You know what I mean? That I wasn't able to really process, because you know how it is when you're talking to someone throughout the day. You got 100 million things going on, and you're like, man, this is good stuff. I really want to take note of it. You know, it's really constructive, criticisms, and some of them not criticisms, but so give me your breakdown from a communication standpoint of, not just maybe that episode, but other episodes that you've watched.
Well, let me say, first of all, thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a privilege and it's an honor, and I'm very flattered and humbled with the introduction. We have known each other. So I don't know if you remember this. Probably the first time I met you, or one of the first times I met you.
Floyd Mayweather fight.
I was going to say, was it Floyd? It was at Darren. It was
at Darren's or Jeanette's. It was at Jeanette's.
Wrist Lake.
Yeah.
And it was a fight, and it might have been a De La Hoya fight. Angela, my daughter, was like 3 or 4.
Well, Paulie was just in diapers.
I don't even know if Paulie was there yet.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, it was.
Angela was, and somehow we started talking martial arts. And I said, yeah, I've been doing this stuff, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's got to be, it's at least 25 years ago.
And here, you were just under the assumption like, yeah, it's Friday. He'll want to do jiu-jitsu now, but he ain't coming. And I came and I started, and I was religious for, really up until I started coaching back in 2020.
You were good. You were good.
Well, here, it just took me so long, and I'm sure you dealt with this as a former football player, to quit playing jiu-jitsu the same way you play football, because you get your butt kicked really quick, right?
I got some great stories on that. I came into jiu-jitsu with zero knowledge of grappling. I never wrestled. I had done boxing, and I enjoyed boxing. And this will get into a broader story, because really it's interesting. My jiu-jitsu journey was part of my faith journey.
Sure. Yeah. Well, because here, and I've said this to so many people, humility is the biggest part of your faith, right? To be able to humble yourself, right, before God. But if you can't humble yourself in jiu-jitsu, you're going to quit or you're going to get hurt.
You're good. And I got hurt. So I'll tell you just a quick story, since, we both have a passion for jiu-jitsu. I was lifting all the time. I was a big time weightlifter. I'd actually done some bodybuilding. I did some powerlifting competitions, and everything for me was, strength oriented. It's what I respected. And so I had started at Welcome Mat Judo. It's a broader story that maybe we'll be able to get into, but there was a guy there, Steve Hanna. I miss him.
Oh, yeah.
One of my best friends. He was the original OG of jiu-jitsu in Kansas City.
Yeah. And here, so it's funny, but I remember you mentioning Steve Hanna's name, and anyone in the sport that was good at jiu-jitsu knew who Steve Hanna was?
Steve preceded everybody. Steve brought jiu-jitsu to Kansas City, was in his basement, and he was a doctor.
He was an anesthesiologist, wasn't he?
Yes, one of my best friends, and he would travel and take privates with Hickson. And it was a combination of the fact that he was a genius. He had like a photographic memory, and the fact that he was very athletic. He'd pick up a move like that, and I would train with him. So I met him at Welcome Mat Judo because there was no jiu-jitsu. So I started doing judo. He was there. We started training a little bit on the side, started enjoying it, and we'd spar, and he armbarred me. And I went home and I festered on it. And I said, he's never armbar me again. That guy's 185 pounds. I'm benching 380, whatever. He'll never armbar me again. He hits me in an armbar. Now, this is the whole point of jiu-jitsu. It's your body against one limb. It's a leverage mismatch.
Right.
So I'm like trying to curl him, and I'm in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to impose my will. I'm going to be tougher than the armbar. Pop.
Right.
He pops my arm. I scream. He's like, what's wrong? Oh, nothing, nothing. I'm fine. He said, why didn't you tap? I said, I don't know why I didn't tap. I knew why I didn't tap.
Right.
I don't want to tap to a guy that was smaller than me and weaker than me, which is the whole purpose of jiu-jitsu. So I go home, and later that night, I get a phone call. He said, hey, I can't train with you anymore. I said, what? He goes, I can't train with you anymore. And I said, Steve, why? And he goes, you have too much ego. You're going to get hurt, and I don't want to train with somebody like that. That struck me. That was one of the first times in my life that I had an option. I had a choice. And I've seen this with a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu and in life, where I could take that criticism, process it, think about it, or I could blow them off and say like, well, who are you? And, I'll get you, wait till I keep. And I thought, and it was pretty quick. I said, I'm sorry. I said, you're right. It was my ego. I will not do it again. Can I train with you? And after that, he became my coach.
Well,
he wasn't just a guy I was competing with.
If you remember, a similar situation happened with you and I. So we were in the basement, and we would go every Saturday, sometimes during the week. And every week I'm getting my butt kicked, and you know how it is. I mean, you get excited and you think you're getting better, but then you show up with a purple belt. You were a purple belt at the time, and Joe Giglio was a blue belt who may as well be a brown belt, right? I mean, he's just a bull. And I'm in a basement with you two, and I'm just constantly getting my butt kicked. And I got up one time and I slammed on the mat, and I'm just pissed off. And you went and you just, and it was, I'll never forget this, because it was like the more irritated I got, the calmer your voice got. And you went, Frank, you go, my purple belt's gotta mean something. And I'm like, God darn it. He's like, you said, I'm not a purple belt for nothing. You're going to have, and then, but what it ends up happening is you operationally define win differently. Maybe I passed your guard.
Right.
Maybe I got out of side control. Right. Maybe I escaped a mount. Maybe I still got tapped 4 times. Right. But, maybe, and then you're like, hey, I passed Jesse's guard. Hey, I was able to escape his side mount. Hey, I was able to get out of knee on belly, or here, hey, Jesse was winded as hell and sweating his butt off when he was done with me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just little things you operationally define win better. And that's what kind of carries me through,
But, I've been coaching for a long time, and we have guys that will come in, tough guys, sometimes a bodybuilder, a football player, big guy, and they can't handle losing. And I said, look, man, you've been coming for 3 months. My black belt,
which is nothing.
Something, right?
Yeah, 3 months is nothing.
You think you're going to come in and mow through me and the guys? Then why would you even be here? The smart guys humble themselves, and they learn. The other guys, I never see them again.
Right. Well, and I wish it was something I was able to do much younger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just, because if let's say I'm a 16-year-old kid now, knowing then what I knew now, I would go from the field to the mat. I would go because football I love. I could never take that away, but I would immediately get done with football and I would be on the mat the rest of the time. you know.
Well, there's a lot of shout outs because, like, you know, I give a shout out to Welcome at Judo because I started there and there were great guys like Chris Heckaton and Sean Watson, trained at the Olympic Training Center, had wrestling backgrounds. Those guys were monsters. And again, I had no concept of grappling. To me, you hug a guy and squeeze him or you bench press him away. That's about all I knew, like a hard headlock, you know.
Right.
And to see guys like own you. So it's, you know, it's the old analogy. I don't care if you're a lion. If you get dragged in the ocean by the shark, you're going to die.
Right.
And these guys were even worse because they were so good with takedowns, which a lot of jiu-jitsu guys are not. They got to decide whether they keep you on land or they put you in the ocean.
Well, and so like for me, I tried to play that judo game, right? And I finally said, here, heck with this. My body just can't deal with it.
Right.
I had, you know my history. My shoulders, back, knees, all that stuff. And I figured, okay, I'm going to the ground. There is no way around this. You know, 100% the fight's going to start standing up, but I am going to the ground. Now, I could either go to the ground on my terms or I can go to the ground on your terms. If I play that judo game, I don't know whose terms it's going to be. But if I get grips and sit, I get to go to the ground on my terms. Now, the caveat to that is now you have to play guard, which you know as well as I mean, Harry, you were a brown belt before you really just started to get a guard.
Oh, I was a black belt. I mean, I had no guard until recently. My guard was turtle guard, which is where you flip
all
to
fours.
all fours
Yeah.
and you start working sweeps or stand-ups. And it was really when I recently lost a lot of weight and just dedicated myself to saying, you know what, I'm not going to get heavy and I'm not going to bullfight anymore. The guys, you know, I was 230 plus. And so I was going against, I got guys on my team, 305, 285, 260, 230.
That's monsters.
Ex-college linebacker.
Yeah.
And I just got tired of like, I'm teaching them everything that I know and do. And the best I'm getting at some point is going to be stalling out and grip. I said, forget it. I'm going to learn guard. So I'm at the level I should be at. I mean, I had a guard, but it was a guard to get right back to turtle, get right back up. So I'm having a
And it was a
blast
guard
doing
to probably hunt rabbits.
Yeah.
You were not going to hunt no bears with
Right.
it. Now you can hunt a bear with it.
Well, we're getting there.
Wait,
I got
okay,
some bears.
let's just say we could defend a bear.
I'm having a lot of fun. I took the gi off. I'd never done no gi. I always thought, you know, there's a risk. It's a lot of probably wrestling oriented. It's a lot of speed. You know, wrestlers get hurt a lot because of the scrambles and the action. Believe it or not, it's been a lot easier on my body. Like a lot less of the grippings and ripping grips. It's a lot of overhooks, underhooks. I'm having a lot of fun playing footlocks. It's a nice equalizer against really big guys. So I'm like,
What are you playing? Like a half guard, a butterfly guard?
No, man. You know what? I'm playing a full guard.
You're playing a closed guard.
I'm playing, well, no, because I got short legs. So
That's what I
my
was gonna
legs
say.
get open pretty quick. But I've gotten really good for me at retention. So guys get really frustrated. I'm hitting triangles.
Right.
Now I'm trying not to throw them on guys that are 305.
Right.
Because you're going to get smashed, you know. But I'm integrating them. And I'm saying for these guys, this works, you know. But going back to what I was saying, so it was a shout out to Welcome At, then a shout out to Steve Hanna, who I miss a lot. He was a great mentor and friend.
We should probably talk about what happened to Steve Hanna. So
Steve called me one time after training. I'll never forget it. We trained in my basement. I remember he picked up Paulie, my son, and was holding him. He was still in diapers. He's 20 now. And a few days later, I hadn't heard from him. He called me and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm at the hospital. And I said, Steve, what's going on? And he said, I was at Panera's with my wife and I had a seizure. And I go, oh no, well, what's up? You know, he's a young man. He's in his 30s. And he said, I've got brain cancer. And I said, what? He said, I have brain cancer. And I said, no, you don't. And, you know, at that time and at that age and not dealing with anybody who'd had cancer, you know, I'm like, well, what does that mean? He goes, well, it's stage 4. And I'm like, okay, how many stages? What is that?
Right.
What does that mean? He said, and he's a doctor. He said, I'm going to die. And I cried. I said, no, that's not going to happen, you know? And he went into remission for a year, started training again. He had to stop training during chemo, got his black belt from Pedro Sauer, had to relearn parts of his jiu-jitsu out because he'd had laser surgery. He had some chemo. And I'll never forget because I went down to Rodrigo Vagis to train. And Rodrigo Vagis in the day and maybe still today.
he's at St. Louis.
They were hardcore, tough guys.
Because I remember the first tournament I did, it was in St. Louis, and Ryan Van Gorp, also who had trained with Steve Hanna, said, if Vagie's guy's there, this is going to be a war.
They're like clean guys. I mean, they're in shape. A lot of ex-wrestlers. They trained super hard. They were super technical. So I go down there and I had a bad day. I mean, they had Big Mike Rogers. I went with him. He was an ex-wrestler. They had, what was his name? Red. He had curly red hair, was undefeated in his tournament. They had a bunch of that Brazilian Mike. So they had a bunch of good and big guys. And I think I got anxious, because I'm like training with these guys that are all studs. And so I didn't feel like I performed well. I had a little bit of cardio, I think it was some anxiety, and I call him up and because I want to get my purple belt. I was a blue belt. And he said, hey, how you doing? I said, I'm doing okay. I said, but I had a bad day. He said, really? And I go, yeah, I got real tired. I don't know if I got like anxiety, just the level those guys are. I didn't perform. And I'm going on and on and on. And finally I said, well, how are you doing? And he goes, well, the cancer's back. And I'm like, Steve, I'm sitting here going on and on about having a bad day at jiu-jitsu. I go, when did you find out? And he goes, about a week ago. And I go, why didn't you tell me? And he goes, I didn't want to ruin your trip. That's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
I get chills telling you that story.
And if I remember, I think Ryan might have been the last guy Steve trained with, because if I remember, Ryan told me he was over there and Steve had a seizure while Ryan was over there, and then he went into the hospital, and I don't think he ever came back out.
No, Steve did. Steve taught me a lot about death. There was a lot of dignity in what Steve did, because when the cancer came back, and he was a doctor, the doctor said, hey, I think we need to attack this full bore, just blast this thing. He said, well, what are my chances? And he said, 2%. He said, I'm not going to do that. It's rat poison. I'm going to be blind. My hair's going to fall out. My kids aren't going to recognize me. I'm not going to be able to talk. And the guy's like, you got to do it. You got to do it for your family. So I'm not doing it. So he took some steroids.
It's called dexamethasone.
He took dexamethasone to keep the swelling down as long as possible. The time he had spent training with me, this is a neat part of the story. I'd call him up, our normal training time, say, hey, how you doing, man? He goes, or I'd call, and actually his wife would answer. I said, is Steve there? She goes, no, he's downstairs praying in the mat room. He went from physical grappling to spiritual grappling. He went down to his basement, got a hold of himself and who he was. Some of the cool, this is what's so awesome about God, is sometimes in the worst tragedies and in these things where you can look at it and say, why? And this isn't right. And some of the most beautiful things can happen. He told me a couple things. One, he told me he wrote a letter to anybody he'd ever offended, that he'd ever hurt. He said, I'm sorry, number one. Number two, he said, Jesse, I know God can heal me, but if he heals me and I turn back into the arrogant SOB doctor I was, I told him I don't want to be healed. I know he can heal me. He said, but I had always relied on science, and this is now out of the hands of science. So I would call him, and he's in the mat room and he's grappling, but he's grappling in a new way. He took the meds. It controlled it. I saw him probably a week before he passed. We went and had lunch, me, him, and his wife at an Indian restaurant. And he looked good. He was a little swollen. I said, how do you feel?
Dexamethasone will do that. Yeah.
He said, I don't like feeling full, because he was always in good shape. But he said, I'm ready. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm ready for mortal to put on immortality, for corrupted to put on incorruptibility, which is a verse from Paul. He had no fear. He hadn't fallen. He had all his mental faculties. His wife called me probably about a week later. She was crying. She said, hey, I want to let you know Steve passed away. And I said, are you okay? And she said, yeah. He'd had a seizure and he had a headache. He didn't feel good. He said, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to go take a nap. She said he fell asleep, and it was the way his mom said he used to sleep when he was little, with an arm up, and he passed in his sleep. And it taught me so much.
When you're dealing with that, to be able to go peacefully, that's a big deal, right?
And I sat there and he said, I'm going to fight death. Me and death are going to, he said, I'm ready.
Well, I think sometimes God will let you get sick so that you
need him. You got to come to him.
You got to come to him.
It's part of life.
Right. And then you're at peace with it. And I was listening to, I'm sure he's a Christian worship singer. His name's Toby Mac.
Yeah.
Okay, so Toby Mac had a son die very similar to how Nina died. I think it was fentanyl.
Yes.
I think it was fentanyl. And he did a little 6-minute talk. I'll send it to you. But he said going early, he said you may not be getting cheated. You know, and he was reluctant to say it, right? But he says, you know, when he dreams about his son and what his son is seeing and what his son is experiencing and the promises of heaven, he says, going early, I don't know that it's necessarily getting cheated. And that kind of stuck with me a little bit.
You know,
because a lot of times, like we look at things from an earthly standpoint, and I don't necessarily even think we're capable of comprehending it. You know, because like we think of it like, oh man, I hope they're okay. And oh man, I hope they don't miss us like we miss them. It's like, no, they don't. But you can't wrap your head around that. At least, you know, I grapple with that a lot, you know.
When my mom's lymphoma came back, we were talking out on my deck. Probably this was the last Christmas, and she passed in March. This was 7 years ago. Miss my mom. For shout outs, she's my number one.
Yeah.
Miss mom. Love you, mom. But I remember her saying, you know, she had this thick Portuguese accent. Oh, Jesse, who's going to take care of your father when I'm gone? Who's going to take care of all this stuff? Because she grew up very poor, and her and my dad made a wonderful. Her and my dad made a very wonderful life for themselves. And she said, "Who's going to take care of all these things?" You know. And I said, "Mom, don't worry about the things." I said, "Listen, when you left your mother's womb, it was a place of comfort and peace, and you don't remember a thing about it. You went to a new world. You went to a new life." I go, "You're going to go to a new life. We'll take care of business here. We'll respect you. We'll honor you. We have." I said, but you can go in peace. And one of the most beautiful things my mom said when I was holding her hand before she passed in the hospital was, "I die so happy. I die in peace." I mean, to be able to say that.
That's a big deal.
To be able to say that.
Yeah.
And mean it. She said, "I'm so happy. I'm so blessed." My sister was telling me she had a friend whose dad passed away. They couldn't do an open casket because his face was so contorted because he was so afraid of death. And so, you know, you take these little pleasures in life, you take these little things in life and you learn from them, right? You learn how to deal with
I don't know if that transitions when you're faced with it, but I could tell you I'm scared of it.
Yeah.
I mean, despite being a Christian and someone who believes and someone, you know, who holds on to, someone who holds on to promises of God, right? Because that's another thing that Toby Mac said, you know, when tragedy happens, you have to hold on to something really, really sturdy, and you have to hold on to a promise of God, and you have to make sure it's something he promised you, right?
Right.
And so if you hold on to the promise of, you know, a reunion and this eternal life with him and whomever's went before you. But nonetheless, the thought of, I don't want to see death coming, you know? So to face it like Steve did, or like your mother did, you know, I think that would be very scary for me.
And I think it's why we have to find fulfillment. You know, so much of my life was geared towards objectives. You know, I want to lift this much. I want to look like this. I want to get this kind of job. And it was always these future things. And I remember it hit me one day. I said, I'm done. I'm going to live in the moment. And I'm going to enjoy the moment. I'm going to enjoy my daughter dressing up as a princess. And we're going to have a tea party. And we're going to do Cinderella. And nothing's going to take that time or moment away from me, so that one day when I'm gone, she'll have that memory. And one day when I'm in that bed, I'll say, man, I'm a blessed man. I lived a good life. I'm happy.
It's a big deal.
Know? But I think it all circles back. And this is why jiu-jitsu, I'm not married to jiu-jitsu, but why it's such a passion for me, because it correlates to life. You know, and there's a verse in the Bible that says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of darkness in high places. That word for wrestle, when Paul's using it, is not like a folk style match, which is a tremendously hard thing to do. These are gladiatorial grappling matches with submissions to the death. It's like, look, we're not wrestling against flesh. Your problems are not really people. It's the evil around us in this world.
Right.
You know, so, and
then you end up fighting the wrong thing the wrong way.
Right. Half the time, you know, and I'm guilty of it. We get into these battles and we start personalizing it. And we get really mad at this person. And, you know, there's so many other components as to what's creating all this angst and divisiveness and everything.
I look at my dad, and he was, the freest. He was here. He did worry a lot. So he was kind of bound by worry and anxiety. But when it comes to resentment or being bitter or being angry, you were never going to get that from him.
But don't you think that generation, their anxiety was partly caused, because I think of our grandparents, our parents, the hardships they went through, the depression. Like my parents had nothing when they got married. My dad went into the military, had to get a sign off because he was still in high school. Then he married my mom. He met her in the Azores, which are islands off of Portugal, and stationed in Madrid, I think, and then came back to the United States, but with like $300, $500. These people were tough people, but they had to worry. They had to worry about what happens. There wasn't the social network we have now, the social support.
So, I don't know. For me, I have to wonder if anxiety is generational, right? Like if you look at it in my family, like take my dad's sister, my Aunt Carol, God rest her soul, might have been, I don't know that there's a prayer warrior that prayed more than that woman. At any given time, if you were at that house or you called that phone, she had a rosary in her hand, I swear to you. But you could call her and say, Aunt Carol, yeah, babe, what's the matter? What do you mean what's the matter? But she was always like anticipating something bad to happen. You know what I mean? Right. And despite being, a devout Catholic, a prayer warrior, she still, I don't think she realized this, but didn't really fully trust God. People who worry don't. If you're going to sit there and worry about, and I'm guilty of it, but you can't sit there and say, oh, I love God, I trust God, and then simultaneously worry all the time.
You're right.
You can't do that.
No.
And I'm guilty of it because I worry about it. I worry about finances. I worry about my kids. I worry about, whatever. I could find things to worry about, but I also grew up looking at that my entire life.
Well, and you think so, bringing this back to jiu-jitsu, because I think jiu-jitsu is a good correlation, because what we're given in the physical is what happens in the spiritual. When do you not have anxiety when you were doing jiu-jitsu? It's when your technique was coming together and you felt like you were getting a game and you knew you had answers. And the thing about jiu-jitsu is there's truth in the journey of jiu-jitsu. When you're going with somebody, you can't say, I'm going to choke them out and then, try to do like a shoulder lock. You have a strategy and a pattern that you're trying to do, and truth is truth. Like when you hit it, okay, I got the position, I got the arm, I got the angle, I got to finish it. If I didn't finish it, what was wrong? Did I have the arm angled wrong? Did I not have it? So life is like that, right? We're constantly in these battles, and we feel best when we have our techniques. And so the spiritual correlation is, what's your spiritual strategy? What's your spiritual techniques? What's your spiritual weapons when you're attacked, And so like for me, I'll give you a quick story because I think it's really important to shout out how I changed. I was pretty wild. I didn't have a reason to be wild except for growing up. I graduated in 86. My parents were strict Catholic. I went to Central Methodist College my freshman year, NAIA on a football scholarship.
Why did I think you went to Jewel?
I transferred the next year.
Okay.
There's a reason I transferred. Okay. I got in so much trouble. We went down to Columbia. We went down to MU. We partied. Remember your checkbook? You could look through it.
Yeah.
You would probably find, Pizza Hut, ATM. We would go down to Columbia probably 3-4 times a week. By George's, what was some of the other places?
By George's was in Columbia. I remember that.
By George's was a big one. There were some other clubs that we would go to, and I was an idiot, right? I had this horrible combination of like, okay, I'm out of my parents' home. I've seen Animal House. I guess this is the rite of passage. What you do, you go crazy. You're trying to feel out what it means to be an adult. But I had like that weird mixture that guys have sometimes. You're trying to figure out your identity. So you have low self-esteem, a little bit of short man syndrome, but I'm lifting and I'm young and mixed with arrogance. And like, that's the worst cocktail.
Right.
Like self-esteem mixed with pride and arrogance, right? Always getting in fights. We were always doing stupid stuff. So I got in a lot of trouble. At one point I got kicked out. My parents had to come down. It was a big thing. I got back in. My dorm was like a prison. Like I got separated and I had to go in a separate dorm in a separate room. I had to make every class. I couldn't miss a class. My buddies had went and like advocated to not kick me out of school. They came back and they'd go visit me. And it was like literally like, thanks for the water and bread, guys, come visit me again. And I'm like, I gotta get a fresh start. And I went to Jewel and I was still going out and stuff, but I had like I started having an emptiness that I was starting to feel, but it blew up in between Central Methodist College and William Jewell. I was at a party, and it was a field party. It was out in Parkville, and it had been 20 degrees for 3 weeks. The ground was like this, right? And I was still in my party mode, and I'll never forget. I was with one of my buddies. He went to Oak Park, Rodney Baker. He was a middle linebacker, tough dude, and we were always out getting in trouble. Low on alcohol, less girls to guys ratio. Bad mix, right? So normally I never started fights, but if there was a fight, I was first to jump in line. Dumb. This time was a time where I was like looking for it. I don't know why. So this guy, I still remember his name. I love the guy today. I didn't back then. Chris Seaver Morgan, he ended up playing college football, D1. He's a stud, great guy. He was kissing on a girl that my buddy Rodney had been talking to. And I look at Rodney, I go, Rodney, you going to put up with that? He kind of looks at me and I'm like, man, jack him. Boom. He hits Chris in the face. Chris is like 6'7". Rodney's like 6'2", 230. Chris looks over Rodney and is like, who hit me? Like an ogre. And I'm like, ooh, man, we might have bit off more than we chewed. Rodney was a tough guy. Never seen him lose a fight. He was getting whipped. He took off somewhere in the middle of this fight. And I remember the punches. You could hear them. Like This was like a no-joke fight. I didn't have a lot of people there. I'm leaving. Somebody pushes me. I get smart. I'm thinking, oh, okay, now I get in a fight and we can all go home and talk about how we all got in a fight. Kid tackles me. I remember his name today. I like him now, but he tackles me. He's sitting on top of me. He's punching me. And I'm like, okay, here we go. I go to roll him. I start getting kicked. There was a reason I got kicked because when Rodney was fighting Chris Seaver Morgan, I jumped in and started kicking him. And I'll never forget, there was a ring of people. I called it the circle of death. It was so hot and humid. This was like out of a movie. So the ring of death is around me. Every time I'm getting punched and I cover up, I'm getting kicked. Every time I'm getting kicked and go like this, he's punching me. There was a moment where I go, I'm going to die. I really thought that. I got real melancholy. I got one of those punches where you see like a flash.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to die. And everything was moving in slow motion. And I got really sad because I thought, gosh, my parents are going to find my body here. They're going to say, what a waste. I don't know why, Frank. And this all ties into jiu-jitsu, my life, everything and where it went. In my mind, I go, Jesus. I just said that in my head. I wasn't religious. I mean, I'd grown up. I went to Catholic schools, and stuff, but I wasn't really religious. Everything stopped. My buddy had come back. He'd pulled on me so hard, he broke my belt loops. When I said, when my mind, Jesus, everything stopped. He like pulled me up, put my arm over him. I had one other buddy. We're walking out to the car. I have so much blood on me. My white shirt is red. It looks like somebody dipped it in paint. And I'm like, wow, I got trashed. I got beat. I'd never been beat up, much less that bad. So we're driving to my apartment. I'm all lumped up. I'm just sitting there and they're all talking. Da, 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 da. We get to my apartment. I went to Pius. I had a bunch of Pius friends I love today. Still know. Phones ringing. People heard about what happened. People are saying, hey, those guys are celebrating. Why don't we get ball bats when they get back to their house 2 a.m, break some legs, this and that. And I'm sitting off to the side of my apartment. And I'm going, why when I said Jesus did everything stop? And I'm really perseverating on it. Frank, I'll tell you, as much as you hear my voice right now, I hear a voice audible, but not in my ears, in my head. And it says, if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. I heard it like you and I are talking. And then I had this impression, if you keep living your life this way, one day you will die. You'll die looking over your shoulders. I just felt that. And I looked at everybody and I go, hey guys, it's good. We're done. What do you mean we're done? You know, those guys knew, like once a fight started, like we're all in, we're done. What do you mean we're done? I go, I started it. We're done. It's over. You know, I got what I deserved.
Right.
You know, so they're kind of like, okay. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, I got to find the voice. I got to find the voice. And that's how my faith journey started. There's a component to that. If you're interested, we can get back to it. But once God found me, I didn't find God.
Right.
Once God found me, brushed me off, and I looked at him, saw him for who he was. He took all the rage away. And I don't know why I had inner rage, just young testosterone, you know, this hurt or that hurt, magnified in my mind. He took it all away. And I remember going, wow, if I ever have to protect myself, I have no idea what I'll do now, because I fought red. You know, I just was like Latin temper, enough fights. I know what I'm trying to do. I don't have that. I don't have hatred for anybody. I don't have rage for anybody. And I was looking at it, I'm like, I don't care what. I started boxing, went to Bell Rec, boxed under Coach Green, Coach Leroy Green. And shout out to those guys at Bell Rec, which is not there anymore. Ron L. Jones, who's training boxers now, is awesome, brother. But anyway, I just didn't have any rage. So I started boxing, and then I said, man, I still don't want to defend myself by knocking somebody's teeth out. I wish I could I'm looking at Steven Seagal and Aikido, and then I saw the first UFC. And I go, I got to learn this jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Long story long. But that's how my jiu-jitsu journey started.
Right. You know, so for me, Joe Giglio would always say, come on, you need to come to class. You need to come to class. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to class, you know. I'm just, and I had just got done playing football, and, you know, I certainly missed football, but I didn't think at the time anything was going to be able to fill that void. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it was just like, okay, I don't want any part of that. And then you and I had our conversation. So between Joe, and then finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to go try this. Right. And so I go, and at the time it was Adrenaline Athletics, Chad Osborne's, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yes.
He was a fantastic
Chad,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah. So it was Adrenaline Athletics, and it was I went to a couple of the kickboxing classes, and then I tried to do jiu-jitsu, and Ethan Day's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Gosh darn it. She's a beautiful girl.
We're showing our age here. I know who you're talking about.
Well, I can't think. I can't.
And I could.
It's going to drive me crazy. Anyway, she beat the crap out of me, you know, and that's when I was like, oh man, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because here I was 28 in way better shape than I am now, much stronger, much faster, much everything.
Right.
You know, and if she tapped me once, she tapped me 6 times in a 5-minute round, and I don't even think she broke a sweat. And I was like, this is something I have to learn. And then I just went home, bought a gi, and just started going.
And you were great, and you did. I mean,
yeah. Here, and if you look at, like, particularly, you know, certain positions, you know, linebackers, defensive linemen, a lot of the techniques for block destruction it's grappling now, you know, because they take the head and shoulder out of the game so much now, which they should, right? So most of your block destruction is hips and grips.
oh gosh, when we were playing, I had a neck roll, and it was forehead first. You know. Yeah. Just crash into the guy.
Right. You know, you just
between that and boxing, that's probably why sometimes I don't know where my keys are at.
You ain't got to tell me. You know, but I think that's why wrestlers make such good football players. They make such good football players.
Right.
You know,
they understand. I remember years ago I talked to Dave Zott at a church function that I was at, and I said, man, Dave, let me ask you a question. How do you deal with guys like Brian Joswiak and Tony Mandrich that are all juiced to the gills, or on human growth hormones, they're huge? He said, I wrestled my whole life. He said, it's just leverage. Yeah. And that always struck with me, because he just had a farm boy build. I'm sure he was super farm boy strong, but he did not have a power lifter bodybuilder. When I thought, you know, if you don't have muscles, when you have that much muscle, you can overpower anybody. It doesn't matter. No, that's not the case. you know.
Somebody told me Brett Holder's an attorney.
Brett is an attorney. Well, he's got his law degree. He works, I think, compliance now. But and
speaking of
Brett,
maniacs, and I shouldn't say maniac because he's actually a sweetheart of a guy, but he's like that bear trying to play with a rabbit and accidentally kills it. I mean, every time you roll with them, that's what it's like.
Brett's a tough guy.
Oh my God.
Brett's just, he's technical. He wrestled for Gary Mayhem. He was recon. He's one of my best friends. I love the guy. Very loyal guy and very tough. And he's just gotten more and more technical. He's been training with Clean, been training with us guys. And he's a handful, man. And the worst thing about it is he don't like to lose. I told him one time, I said, hey, man, I said, sometimes put yourself in a bad position and don't be afraid to, like, if you get caught, like, learn how to work out of bad positions. And he kind of teared up and he said, man, it's just, when I was out on tours, like, weakness or losing might cost me and my guys their life. And you don't think about it like that, like how hard it must be, because he was win only. Right. It's life or death. You got to win.
And it was for him.
It was for him.
Yeah.
But great guy, tough guy, known him for years. He works.
He was a Division I football player too, yes?
He played football for Jewel.
Was he a Jewel guy?
Yeah,
okay.
He was a Jewel tight end.
Okay.
Good football player. Just a hard man. Brett feels no pain he may feel pain, but you're not going to know till a couple days later.
I remember even when he was a blue belt and a purple belt where, really good jiu-jitsu guys would say he's just too much reality for people, and it's just the truth. I mean, he was just so strong and so explosive that.
We were at a Clean camp and he was there and there was a big guy there. I think he was a blue belt and Brett was white, or he was purple and Brett was blue. And at some point we were going to do takedowns, and Brett's done judo and wrestling for a long time. And Clean kind of like told him, let the dogs out, and he's like, go all out, go all out. Man, Brett hipped through this guy and drove him through the earth. And the guy was done. And, later, Clean said, he goes, man, that Brett, he's too much reality for most people. Too much reality for most brown and black belts. Like, there are those guys out there. Like, that's why I don't mess with, like, upside down and berimbolo. I'm like, my jiu-jitsu is very straightforward. I want to make sure I have some self-defense application for it, and the knowledge that you're not invincible. You're not Superman, right? I mean, you get the right guy with the right mentality. You have a strategy first to survive. That was always the Elio Gracie way. And then the Carlson Gracie way is, and once you have your angle or your advantage, destroy him.
Right.
So it's kind of like.
He was a little bit more aggressive.
Oh, much more aggressive. Right. And it's been interesting being on both sides of that family, because now I'm under the Carlson side. I have been since purple belt.
Right. And that's an aggressive side.
Oh, that's like, Elio was, hey, the door's locked, check for a key under the mat, see if the window's open. The Carlson side's like, do that quickly, and if it's not there, ram the door down, break the door down. Use technique.
Yeah.
Use leverage when you do it, but break it down.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I would have responded to a guy like Dustin very, very well as a younger man before I was beat up.
Of course, Dustin's amazing. He's what I call tough medicine. He's hard medicine. He comes and trains us once a month. It's amazing, and it's cold splash of water in the face. Because when I train the guys, I'm a little less formal. I'm a little more relaxed. I go into a lot of depth in the technique. We still train hard. Every Saturday we do 10 rounds, 10 6-minute rounds, minute break, 4 rounds randori or takedowns with wrestling. And then when Clean comes, it's like all business. Like, there's another level with coaching and drilling and so forth that they need. It's like an inoculation, right? And so they need to know, like, this is real deal, what they did in Brazil, how they trained, shut up and do the work. And then you can breathe out when he's gone. But they elevate. My guys are getting really tough. Really tough.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Their level and their technique and everything, they're kind of a hidden gem. It's kind of a hidden gem.
How many students you got?
I probably vacillate between 12 and 20, but, we don't market.
You probably don't want much more than that.
I want a core solid group that buys in. I decided to teach jiu-jitsu to share it. I don't do it for a living. I don't do it for money. It's very inexpensive. Sometimes I'll just tell people, look, if you don't have any money, just come wash the mats. right?
Right.
Because I don't have to. I don't have a club. I'm not paying rent. And I it's nothing against the guys that do. They have to do that.
Right.
They have to charge to make a living. So I wanted to be able to offer something to people who maybe can't, right? Who can't afford jiu-jitsu or can't afford a lot. And times are tough right now. It's $15 for a burger, right?
Oh my God.
So I want people who can come and train. And we have a solid core group of guys that have bought in. They train hard. They're diligent. They do the work. And they're getting good.
How about, so you got Angelia and Paulie, and Angelia is doing what?
She's awesome. She's got her own business. So she has communications and multimedia. She's a wonderful artist, beautiful paintings, things like that. But she started her own photography business. She's doing a wedding tonight. So she's busy all the time with shoots. You know, she's doing weddings, announcements, showers. I think she's AngeliaRosePhotography.com. I don't say I'm going to get in trouble now because here was my chance to get her a little press.
Well, here, let's see if we can look her up.
But if anybody's interested, she's phenomenal at her shoots, and she does anything from baby shots, to showers, to high school graduation pics, to
So it's she's got a lot of good stuff up here. She's got so it is Angelia Rose Photography.
And she's my baby girl. I don't actually push her out a lot on so I do on Facebook because I think there's a lot of weirdos, and my daughter's beautiful. So I don't want to get in trouble.
I don't disagree.
So if people ever said, you post a lot about your son, but not so much your daughter. Yeah, there's a reason for it.
Right.
I had my son because of my daughter. I'm like, okay, we got to have a boy that can make sure she's good. I joke around about that. We didn't really have that.
And
much
what's
control.
Paulie? Is he a junior in college?
So Paul's kind of interesting. He just turned 20. He's academically a senior because he got a lot of his tests and stuff done in high school.
Got it.
Athletically, he was redshirted last year. So he wrestles for UCM. And then, so last year was this last year that just passed in wrestling, he was kind of a freshman because he had a redshirt year the year before. So he'll be a sophomore in wrestling, which is about where he is by age, but he wants. And I believe him. He said, "I'm going to get a national championship. I'm going to be a national champion." And so, if he doesn't get it between this year, he's going to go get his master's, and we'll keep saying, "Do your thing." You live once.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And he had some Division I offers. Yes,
he did. He got caught in that COVID senior year,
Was he a 2020 or 2021?
Paul graduated 2 years ago?
2022?
When Paul graduated, Paul's been at school. He had his redshirt year and then this year. So he's been in school 2 years.
2022.
Yeah. So he, Paul only lost 2 matches his junior year, wrestling for Oak Park, class 5?
They're 5.
Yeah. So, wrestling, I think, is the highest they go in Missouri. Do they go class 5?
They're class 5 in Missouri.
I know they are football.
In football, they go to class 6.
That's it. Okay, I was thinking 4 or 5. He was class 5. So he lost 2 matches. One to David Brooks, who's a phenomenal multi-state winner who went up and weighed at a duel and knew Paul's style because they wrestled since they were little kids. Love the guy. And he lost on points. And his only other match he lost was in the semis. He lost on points this is his junior year, lost on points to a kid who now wrestles D1. Then Gary Mayab came, and for those who don't know Gary Mayab was an Olympic alternate. He's a Hall of Fame wrestler at UCM. He was a manager for the Olympic Training Center for Greco. He lives and breathes wrestling. Again, I keep saying shout out. This is honor given to honor that's due. Jason Keck and his team at Greater Heights.
Oh man, those guys are good too. Yeah.
I mean,
Omar Padilla,
all those guys, and then Mayab comes in, and Paul wins state. And so now we're like, well, what do you want to do? He said, I want to wrestle in college, and he's getting notice, and there's teams that want to see him. There's some NAIA teams and some D2s. And then he has Border War with this Kansas state champ. And that was a phenomenal match. It was on Flow Wrestling. It got like 30,000 hits. Paul took an early lead. The guy was a bull. They almost looked like the same build. Paul takes him down, counters a double leg with like a judo throw. I say mount, so you see my jiu-jitsu coming in. Almost pins him. The guy gets out. He's down 5-0. Guy battles back with like 13 seconds left. He's winning by a 0.9 to 8. And it's a very like entertaining match. Kansas on one side, Missouri on the other. Paul hits this foot sweep from judo, and the guy's like horizontal. Boom. And Paul covers him. There's like 7 seconds left. And if the guy gets up, he wins. If he doesn't, Paul wins. So Paul's on him. The guy explodes right as the buzzer, right as the ref blows the whistle. The guy's getting up, but Paul's holding his lat and his arm. So the Kansas side thinks he got out. The Missouri side, who knows Paul's style, knows he's still in a position to throw. Paul wins the match. Then all the attention, the collegiate attention started. Really, it hit because he, and this thing went viral. I say viral. 30,000 to me is
that's a
viral,
lot,
right?
Yeah.
So he went and visited Little Rock a couple times, and he had a really big offer from a great NAIA program. But at the end of the day, a lot of the D1s had already given out all their money, and the ones he did visit wanted him to walk on. And so he's like, Dad, I want to wrestle. I want to wrestle right away. I want to be competitive right away. Oh, and then Coach Garcia, he moves over from Baker to UCM. Well, he's a 3-time D2 national champ. And I remember I called Coach Keck and I said, hey, Paul's got a big offer over here. He's got these guys looking at him. He really likes UCM. And I go, I just heard Coach Garcia's going over there. I go, what do you think? He said, if my son could wrestle for anybody, it'd be Coach Garcia. Now his son wrestles at Little Rock D1, so his son's great. And he goes, but he's the Einstein of wrestling. And Paul in 1 year has learned so much from wrestling.
Yeah. And what's his rank in jiu-jitsu?
He's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu because, he started in judo. He was a junior Olympic gold, silver, bronze medalist. And we had the benefit of, getting to know Nikolai and Ali, Alishir Montobetov, who was an elite judo player.
Oh, gosh,
and
yeah.
Those guys started helping him at an early age.
And a miserable top game when you're rolling with him.
Just a wonderful
sweetheart of a kid. Yeah,
wonderful human being.
Yeah.
So Paul off and on had exposure and training to them, but he would use it for wrestling because what happened was judo is almost an elitist sport. It gets to the point where the cost and the travel is prohibitive. And actually, we brought in Iliadis, who is a world champ and Olympian. I don't know if you knew that, to do a seminar. And we brought in Georgi Zantarai, another world champion, another Olympian. So we were bringing these guys in. Nikolai, give credit to him, he was getting these guys and bringing them in for seminars. And they would work with Paul. And Iliadis lives in Greece. He said, hey, if your son ever wants to come to Greece, he can stay with me and I'll train him. Georgie was in Ukraine and he's like, hey, we got this camp. It's 2 weeks. He can stay at this. I'm like, this is beautiful. I'm like, you ready, buddy? And he's like, I don't want to go. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to go? This is a chance in a lifetime. Well, he's 8, 9, 10. I don't know how old he was at the time, but he was too young to care about it, So he didn't end up doing that. But what we did get was constant off and on training with Ali and Nico. And he uses all that stuff in wrestling.
Yeah.
And he's really good at using it in wrestling. So he just got his judo black belt. He's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. What I meant to say with that is that he's kind of trailed off training jiu-jitsu hard. Just doesn't. He's focused on winning a national championship.
Sure.
Dad, I'm going to come back to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, he could do jiu-jitsu the rest of his life.
And a guy like him and a guy like Ali, those guys 3 months doing guard and guard pass, and all of a sudden you're dealing with guys that are black belts at grip fighting, black belts at pinning, black belts at getting out of pins, black belt with control. I mean, you're like that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I caught the guy in a footlock, 3 weeks ago and now he's killing me. You just got that grappling memory,
Sure. Yeah, he's not going to forget it. I mean, here, Jesse, I remember being over your house in the basement and he would come down. I remember the Incredible Hulk fist that used to growl when he put it on. I'm like, and he was wrestling then, before he could even walk.
So I was sneaky, and his friends always are like, you had this all planned. And I said, I kind of did. So we would play bad guys. And I was always the bad guy. I was Clayface and he was Batman, or I was the Thing and he was Hulk. Well, the Thing's a good guy, but whatever. So we would wrestle and I'd be like, oh, you're not going to be able to duck this punch and take me down. Oh, you got me.
Right.
And I'd start to tip him like I was going to roll him. And I'm like, you're not going to be able to get heavy on this side. And he was a little kid. So I was naturally already trying to, I was already teaching him grappling. And then he got, the wrestling program was really it for him, getting with Greater Heights and Coach Keck and those guys. That was everything. But the lessons, more than that, it's the lessons he learned in life, right? Because sports, again, I talked about, as a young guy and having kind of that identity crisis. Sports helps a lot of that. I played sports, but it's having someone talk you through, like, learning how to lose. My son cried every time he lost till he was 13. I'd be like, son, if you're going to cry, go in the bathroom. It's disrespectful. But every kid did. Right. Every kid in that wrestling room, because all eyes are on them. There's a tremendous amount of pressure. And eventually you learn to accept, like, I didn't lose. I just got to learn, like, or this doesn't mean I'm bad. Right. Or I didn't try hard enough. I'll never forget one time Paulie was wrestling this kid. It's the year Paul won state in youth. And the kid was way overmatched. And Paul was just like much more muscular, much more technical. And he takes the kid down. He's actually looks like he's going kind of easy on him, and he's getting ready to pin him. And his dad is screaming, get up, get up. And I'm thinking, great advice, right?
Right.
Because he's not, because he wants to stay down, right? The kid's trying, and boom, he pins him. They shake hands. We come off. Paul's changing his clothes. I'm right by them, and the son walks off. And the dad, who is grossly out of shape, is screaming at his son, you didn't want it. You quit. You gave up. And I'm like looking at this guy and I'm going, are you serious?
Right.
Like, why would you treat your own kid like that? He goes, get your stuff. We're leaving. Because you don't get to finish the tournament. And I thought, what did you just teach your kid about life? Right? Whereas for like my son, this is the beauty of like these sports. It was the ability to take him aside and say, son, this is life. Like sometimes you're going to be in a relationship. You might be in your marriage, you might be in business. And you're going to get hurt. You're going to get pinned. You're going to, you're going to lose a match. And then you got to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. And it's okay. Right. That's what life is, Just
go back to the drawing board. Go back to the lab. And that's what parents should be focusing on. The problem is monetization of youth sports.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so now all these people think, oh, I got to go get this and I got to go get this lesson. I mean, I've had people call me up and say, hey, I got an 8-year-old. I want you to train him. And I'm like, well, here, listen, I'll train your 8-year-old. I have no problem doing that. But I wouldn't waste your money on me with an 8-year-old. Let him go play on the jungle gym. Go make him play on the jungle gym for 45 minutes a day and watch how much more athletic he or she gets.
Right. Or put them in gymnastics. That's what the Russians do.
Whatever, anything. Let them go run around outside. Go play with them. Go do, here. And then when he's 11 or 12, depending on their attention span, then I can do something. Now, if you want me to just take your money, I'll be happy to. But I just want you to make an informed decision. And that's the conversation I have when they call me when they're that young. Here, I've been a physical therapist for 19 years. Had a guy walk in my office with his son, had pain on the inside part of his elbow. I look at the elbow. There's nothing wrong with the elbow. Structurally, there's nothing wrong with this elbow. I said, you're going to need to sit him. I said, you could come to therapy all you want, but you need to sit him. Oh, we can't sit him. He's got the best arm on the team. Okay, well, here, let's let him play first base. Well, like I said, he's got the best arm on the team. Well, if you don't sit him, he ain't going to have the best arm for long. I said, did you call me or did I call you? So if you want me to take your money, I'll take it. But his elbow is not going to get any better if you don't sit him.
Right.
And I'm just like, come on, man.
Well, the one thing we did with our kids is we said, you got to be doing something. You're not going to be playing video games. We didn't put them ever in one sport year round. And that was purposeful. So Paul and my daughter, till she was 16, they would do judo, they could do jujitsu, and Paul would wrestle and play football. And then we actually had picked up for a couple of years, he boxed. He did youth boxing. He had a couple matches and everything. And you got to find that balance as a parent, right? Because as a parent, you don't want to try to live vicariously through your kid. you ultimately want to build their character and you want to build life skills with sports, ultimately. And then there's that part of you, because you are their dad, you want them to do good. You want them to win. And so you got to balance that so that you're not beating up your kid. You know, I have a friend of mine one time, he was pretty tough on his kid in wrestling, and he would get after him. And one time his kid came off the mat and he was yelling at him. And I pulled him aside. I said, man, come on, you know, you're looking at the world through 43-year-old eyes. He's looking at the world through 8-year-old eyes.
Yeah.
I go, let him just have fun. Let him have fun.
Well, and here, I'll tell you who I'm most impressed with. I was impressed with them last year, and I'm super impressed with them this year, is that Oklahoma girls softball team. Have you paid attention to them at all? Jesse, you're going to love, you'll start. I'm going to let you, give me 1 second. I'm going to let you listen to this comment. The coach is very much a devout Christian, and it has transitioned onto these girls. Okay. Now I want you to now this girl hits a walk-off home run.
Okay.
In the College World Series. Okay.
Okay.
And Brito, you know, she slowed me down and she prayed over me, and she would just like surrender it all. Don't try to control anything. Like, just go for it. Like, no matter what, I'm not justified by whatever the at bat is. So even though I hit a home run, Jesus still loves me. If I would have struck out, Jesus still loves me.
Oh,
so,
that's awesome.
Regardless, and I think that just really just put me into my foundation.
It's the whole team.
Beautiful.
It's the whole team. They all take this attitude, and they're so and they won last year. And I've been following them.
That's really cool.
I love this. I love this attitude. That attitude. It's great
because the sports is fleeting. The trophies are, you know,
the home run's fleeting. If they win the College World Series, it's fleeting. The moment is always fleeting.
And the other thing is, really, as a coach or a parent, what's the relationship you want to have with your kids? I remember a wrestling coach who told me, you know, he destroyed his marriage and he destroyed his relationship with his boys because he was such a good wrestler that he remembers going behind the building and crying because his son lost rookie state. And then he said, what's wrong with me? Like, what is wrong with me? And from then on, he made a switch to trying to make wrestling fun. And there's a balance because there's something to competition, something to winning, because that's life also, you know. But it's also about regarding, like, what do you want your relationship to be? I always, you know, to this day, when I can get out on the floor, Paul and I always pray before every match. Just a quick prayer. Lord, nobody gets hurt. We do our best. And if you would, give us victory. If not, help us to learn. Every time. When he was little and he would tear up, I'd say, hey, buddy, you're all right. You're all right. I go, are you hurt? No. Did you do the best you could? Yeah. I go, okay, I'm really proud of you. Let's go get a cheeseburger.
Right.
And I think that helped him keep a frame of reference. To this day, I'll walk in. He has a college match, and I show up out of town and walk out. He sees me, gives me a kiss in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Love you, Dad. After I leave, love you, Dad. Love you too, son. What could I ask for more? Right. But
the only time I would say that I get on to my kids, it's never about productivity. It's attitude and effort.
Yeah, that's important.
Now I will jump their butt for attitude and effort, you know, but if their attitude and effort's good and they get smoked, okay.
Well, the other thing I try to do is I try to let their coaches be their coach. I see a lot of parents who I didn't have the qualifications in wrestling to coach my son in wrestling. I got my bronze card. I would sit there and video him, and sometimes I'd yell, Osotogari or Sionagi, and then the ref would look at me and go, is that Japanese? You know, and I'd almost sometimes think I was being cute, like maybe tricking everybody. But for the most part, like in practices, all of that. And when practice was over, I'd get in the car with them and I'd say, you know, great job today, buddy. It wasn't my play. I'll coach him in jiu-jitsu because he knows I know what I'm talking about there. But the rest of the stuff, I left him alone. But my point was, we rotated stuff so his body never got over, you know, dependent on just motor skills in one thing. He played football, he wrestled, he did judo, and then, you know, give him an out. Paul plays drums and he loves to cook. So you're working other parts of your mind. You're getting something you can do to get away from it all. And
the key is to keep them off, to monitor how much they play them damn games.
And just all the Snap and Instagram and all the other stuff they can fall into. That was a whole other part.
Well, so like for me, my kids don't have that stuff. Like Gianna's going to be in 8th grade and she don't even have a phone. She's not getting one until she goes to high school.
Yeah.
You know, and Frankie and Gemma, that's just out of the question. But you know, I have this if this then this cause and effect with the games, and it's like, hey, you know, when you get up, you practice, because Frankie loves basketball. Practice your dribbling for 20, 30 minutes, make your bed, do all this, and then you can go play the game for 20, 30 minutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but that's what I monitor.
Smart. And more parents need to do that. And you know this, you know, I'm a big foodie, right? So the kids cook and people go, oh my gosh, you know, your whole family, you can cook, da, da, da. Well, I mean, grew up in a Latin family. My dad's Mexican, my mom's Portuguese, my wife's Mexican and Italian. So food is part of the culture. Food is part of how you show your love. It's one of the things, like with the whole Harris Buckner thing that, you know, and I don't want to sway too far into that, just to say that, like, to me, like, cooking is an expression of love, and it's an expression of creativity, and breaking bread with people is one of the highest things you can do. Whether I'm cooking, whether my son's cooking, whether my daughter's in the kitchen with my wife and mother-in-law,
right?
Everybody's doing it out of love, and you know that coming from an Italian family, you all get
everything
together
revolves
Sunday
around
night.
food, yeah,
right. But people go, how did your kids learn how to cook so well? You know, and I go, you won't believe this, but I mean, we made a decision that we had to have 1 day a week of technology free. It was technology free Sunday, because the kids were already on their DVDs watching The Incredibles, and they had an affinity to cooking. Paul was in diapers. I got video of him flipping eggs, you know, and he couldn't even talk.
Right.
But we were doing technology free Sunday, and I'll never forget, like, the first time we did it, I'm like, this is miserable. And this was, I mean, my son's 20. He was probably 5, 6 years old. So it's a long time ago. But even then, technology was like ruling. It was just that constant entertainment, throwing a DVD, you know, whatever, internet, you know. And I go, let's do this, guys. Let's do an Iron Chef. I'm going to put a bunch of ingredients out, and you guys cook, and then I'll be the judge. Frank, it was 2.5 hours of, like, kids are running outside. We had wild mint, and I put out some chicken or pork chops. I had a little grill I bought them, had the grill on, and I'm announcing it. I'm like, Iron Chef Paul, what are you doing? He's like, I'm mixing ginger, honey, soy sauce, and you know, then I run over to Angelia, and I'd be like, Iron Chef Angelia, it looks like you've got quite a battle. What are you doing? Oh, I'm taking the romaine, and I'm going to grill it with olive oil and kosher salt. And they got so into it. And the funny thing is,
Paul's an amazing cook now.
And you should see my daughter now.
She's good too.
Oh my gosh. I don't know what, she like flipped a switch, because Paul was always the premier chef out of nowhere. So we're living with my mother-in-law. We're building right now. And she started cooking. She's gotten to the whole sourdough thing, which other people are doing, but it's awesome. The, you know, jalapeno and cheddar, the white chocolate and raspberry jam, sourdough. She did her own starter. She started doing her own tortillas. Then she made barreras. Then she made pozole. And these things all from scratch with like 13 different peppers, and you simmer them, and then you blend them, and you take them out, you strain them, and it's a process. My father-in-law likes oxtails. She did oxtails with collard greens and cornbread. I mean, these kids throw out food. I'd rather eat at home than a restaurant.
Sure.
And it came from this.
Yeah.
And it was funny, because I remember one time Paul was grilling a burger. He marinated it in yogurt, and then he put peanut butter on it. And I'm the judge, and I'm like, and he had mint and stuff. I'm like, gosh, it's gonna be so nasty. But I got to like get into the game and stuff. I take a bite. I'm like, this is a Thai burger. This is one of the most delicious things I've ever eaten in my life. And I was like, Paul, this is amazing.
Right.
This is unbelievable, you know? And so just that, again, exploring their creativity, letting them play. What happened was their palates, like they started eating their own intestine and eating their own food. Half this food they would have never ate if I served it to them.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it made them a little bit more diverse.
Yeah, and they got into it. Now everybody in the family loves to cook.
Oh, do they? So do you enjoy cooking too?
I love cooking. I love to grill. I love to cook.
I hate it.
Really?
I hate it. I love eating.
My wife probably favors it the least. She's a really good cook, but her and my daughter and my mother-in-law right now, they cook every Sunday. They cook for my family, her family, and everybody comes over. And I got to tell you, I look around that room, and I told Paul brought some of his wrestler friends. So you know we got to cook a lot of food.
Oh, yeah, you got to feed an army.
Oh, my gosh. When those guys come, we overcook. And I'm looking around. I told a couple of the guys, because you never know where people are coming from. You don't know their story. You don't know if they've come from a dysfunctional home. I said, guys, look around. Multi-generational. My 84-year-old father, my 7-year-old mother-in-law and father-in-law, me, my wife, all my sister, all these different people. I go all the way down to little kids. And I said, this is what life's about. Like, everybody come together. We all have each other's back. We're all eating a good meal and we're just enjoying life. Like, nobody's like snapping. Well, I'm taking pictures of the food.
Right.
But,
right.
But you know what I mean? I'm like, instill this as you get older. When you get married, like, bring everybody around the family table and talk. And
it's such a huge deal. Like, when I was a kid, we ate dinner at the table every single night. I have a kitchen table.
We did too.
Every single night.
We did too.
Every night. And we were eating dinner on Sundays, sometimes by noon. And then we'd eat again at 3, you know. And then now I got this kitchen table in my kitchen, and you could count, I mean, we may sit at it once a month.
Yeah.
And it's because of how busy life has gotten. You know, of course, Michelle's a volleyball coach. I'm a football coach.
Right.
I have a full-time job as well, you know, and the kids are all going different places. But, you know, we would eat together every single night. And we don't really do that as much. And we should.
Well, at the very least, carve out one day a week, you know, so that they learn. Like, we've already told our kids, when you get married or whatever, we want your families back. And like, for us, you know, yeah, sometimes everybody's going in different directions or at school or whatever. But, you know, Fridays tonight, we go out as a family. And it's awesome because my daughter's 23, my son's 20. They can hang out with their friends. They know Friday they're going to dinner. And they get like, what are we going to try? Where are we going to go?
Right. They can go with their friends after.
If it was me, I probably would say, Mom, come on, I'm not going to go, you know. They hang out with us. So we have that good relationship. And then Sunday nights, we do dinner. Paulie comes, and then we pack him and his wrestler buddies off with food, and they're done. But we do this during the school year too. Right now he's home for the summer, but you know, he'll come up on the weekends if he's not wrestling and grab food and go back, just like we did.
Yeah, he'd get his laundry done.
Get his laundry done.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't learn how to do laundry until I moved out of my house at 26 years old. I didn't. Even when I was at Benedictine, I would come home, my mom would do my laundry, and I would go back up there. You know,
hey, we're mama's boys.
I mean,
I grew up the same way.
You know, it's crazy. So tell me what with the jiu-jitsu, and here, let's talk about this real quick because we're on limited time and I wanted to get back to this. This is how the podcast started, and then we went off on a tangent. Give me your feedback of the podcast from a communications standpoint, right? Because you were giving me some good info. And I want to get back to that.
Well, you know, podcast is,
you like be brutally honest.
No, I mean, I've listened in full to the Harris Buckner one. And what I really liked about it is, hey, if you're going to be in this business, you're going to be doing podcasts, take a stand.
Right.
You're going to have people who agree and people who disagree. You're going to have your haters. But at the end of the day, self-respect tells you, like, you know, I am what I am. You like it or you don't, I'm putting it out there, and you did. And I think you did it well. I think you were able to like keep coming back to like what your main points were, number one. Number two, I saw the one with Benny Palm, and I really like that, you know, because I'm younger than Benny, but you know, we looked up to all those guys. Chuck, you know, played
because he was a Jewel guy too. That's right.
But I go back to the Cheez-It Chiefs, you know, Benny or Tony C. Played on the Chiefs. And then Chucky Palm was quarterback there, you know. So I was a little kid when I first met
And then Chuck Palm ended up quarterback at Jewel.
And then I went to St. Pat's, and you know, then I went to Pius, and they were both.
Now Junior and Chuck can't be much older than you.
They're a year older.
Okay.
Yeah. So I played ball with them, and then went to Jewel. Now I transferred. I redshirted my sophomore year, and then by my junior year, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with football. I've been playing since 4th grade, and for me, like, I'm not a big framed guy. And I was always lifting, always putting on size, always putting on strength. And I got more focused on power lifting and getting bigger than being athletic, you know? Right. And then I would hate it because I go through 2-a-days and I'd lose 15 pounds in the sun. And I felt like all that work, you know, that I did and the advantage I was trying to gain from being stronger, I was going to lose. And so I was just like, I'm burnt out. Right. I got burned out. So my junior year, I was done. I just, you know, I wanted to work out and be done with football.
Yeah, that's all right.
But communication wise, no. And I like the, it's great. You got the interplay with your brother, with Andrew.
Sure.
And you guys do excellent. Benny was a great guest. It was great. I was really like sucked into that because he's talking about Maurice Pearl. He's talking
was a stud.
He's going back. I go back to, I don't know, that team, the Maurice Pearl days is when I started watching playing on the hill at Pius.
Right.
Like all the other little kids,
Yeah.
And then my freshman year, I think they went to, did they go to state my freshman year? That was the last year Monachino was there. I think
right.
My sophomore year, Coach Dorcane, was it my sophomore year? Yeah. So I'm Frankie DeFeo running back up there, Walt Scavuzzo, all those guys, Mike Bolano. We had some Scott Tomp.
Scott Tomp, God rest his
great.
Hold on, I got to coach with Scott Tomp for a decade. He was a very, very smart defensive coach. Played at Missouri Valley.
Tony was excellent. Chuck, all those
Tony
guys.
Jr.,
Vince Agrusa, they were all a year older than me. And we had a great team. Carl Ragusa, talk about a stud. That guy walked around at 225, running
Tree
a 4.540. They moved him to running back his senior year. And I think he had 850 yards with 4 games or something. He didn't, and it's harder to remember if it was 4 or 3 or whatever, but his shoulder would always pop out.
Well, he's had a shoulder replacement.
That guy was a moose and smart and tough. And John Simone, guy played baseball, basketball,
football.
I remember
everything.
We played.
I think he was a Division I baseball player. I think he played baseball at MU. Yeah.
And to this day, if you're watching John, I know you kill me in pickleball. You kill me for 3 years. The 3 or 4 times I beat him in 3 years, you would think I insulted his family and spit on him.
Right. He's a terrible loser.
He's the most competitive guy, and
terrible loser.
This is what kills me about John. Whatever he touches is gold. He starts playing pickleball, and all of a sudden he's got backspin, front spin. At this time, he's down to like 215, 218, but at this time he's much heavier. The guy's all over he's skying and hitting spikes and everything. And I'm like, I got nothing I can do against this guy. He's a premier athlete, but one great quarterback, great leader, great defensive back. I think he was free safety. And then he did walk on and play baseball. But I remember, I think when we played, I forgot what team Anthony Peeler played on.
He was MU.
No, in high school.
So they have a documentary from Raytown to it had the Rush brothers, it had Teron Lou, it had Derek Hood, Anthony Peeler.
We played those guys tight.
Anthony Peeler, God darn it!
And I didn't play basketball, obviously. But
I remember Anthony.
We played them tight. Falardo had a jump shot from just anywhere. Simone held Peeler, I want to say somebody's going to come back because it's a fishtail, but I thought it was like 18 points. Held him to like a game low. But I played on a team of great football players, great athletes, guys that all could have played at big schools, could have played. Carl Ragusa walked on at MU. I think he was number 2 in the depth chart.
Paseo to Pembroke. Right. You ought to watch it. It's called From Paseo to Pembroke.
Okay.
And it went from Anthony Peeler all the way to the Rush brothers. And in there they had Teron Lou, they had Derek Hood, they had there was another kid that was really, really good, ended up getting his foot cut off, and they were jacking around with trains. You should watch this documentary. It was really, really good.
Well, John held Peeler to I think a season low.
Here, you know who else held him was Joe DiGilarmo.
Oh, Joe D was good.
Yeah,
good
Joe
player.
DiGilarmo held him too when he went to Rockhurst.
Yeah, good basketball. We have a lot of athletes that went through Pius. They don't get as much of the acclaim. I'd always argue with one of my best friends, Ken Clemens, who coaches for Oak Park.
Yeah,
I always told him
brilliant
our
coach.
Pius 86 team would have beat Oak Park's 86 team, no doubt. They had some studs there: Todd Grace, Ken Clemens, Chris Hensel, Rodney Baker, and we're always arguing about that. But Mitch Werzer, Jasper Bianco, Frank Armato. We had a ton of great guys on our team. John Perlick. So great memories. Pius provided some of the warmest memories. Looking back,
for sure,
and it was great. So
it's a generational school.
Look how much we get segued because we were talking about communication skills. Then I brought up Benny. Then he starts talking about Maurice and Mike Pearl, who I remember. But that was excellent. That was so conversational, and knowing you guys, it makes it a little harder to to coach, critique, whatever, from a communications perspective, because I feel like I'm just sitting down having coffee with you guys, listening to the stories. But no, excellent. I think the interplay with you and your brother, and the way you guys bounce it off, the questions you ask.
What could we do better?
Oh gosh, I'll say this. I don't know if you do this now. I would prep. Like I would have probably an outline of questions I want to ask.
Never done it.
I would do that.
I've never done that.
My
brother told me to do that, and I'm like, oh, I don't need to do that.
I would set a guideline, because let's say we get into some quiet time, a little downtime in our conversation. It's like, how can I move it forward? The other thing is always remember your audience, and I'm flattered that you find me interesting enough to ask me things, but what does the audience want to hear from me that maybe doesn't know me? There may be people who watch this that know me, but what are the types of things? And then ultimately, what's the objective of this particular show? Like, is it to get to know a little bit more about jiu-jitsu? Is it to get to know a little bit more about parenting skills? Is it to share stories and what makes a life feel full,
And it's crazy. Like the whole entire podcast, it's so arbitrary, right? What do you say?
I love it.
It's arbitrary. It's something that my dad and all his friends, that's how they would greet each other. Is what we say.
Everybody at Pius.
Yeah, and so it's arbitrary, and I think I did that for a reason, just because my guests are all over the place. I'm kind of all over the place. I've never really had an outline of anything that I was going to ask someone, because I could talk to the wall. And I'm fine. I could carry on a conversation with just about anyone. Now if you ask me to read something, I'll screw that all up. But I could talk all day long.
Like if I was interviewing you, here's what I would do. I put Frank Termini, I put intro and family. I'd say, tell me a little bit about your family. Tell me a little bit about the kids. Then I might say, tell me a little bit about some of the career things you've done. You've had some career choices, some career moves, right? Challenging, right? Like what would you tell maybe business owners, entrepreneurs, what'd you learn? Then I might go into sport. Like, you were a really good football player. You were a college football player. You got into jiu-jitsu. You've had a lot of injuries. Do you correlate that with what you did? Did you do things wrong? What would you change in the future if you were coaching other people? How have you managed to continue to be fit and healthy in spite of, different surgeries? I know you had that time where your shoulder was like a mess, and you got the staph in it, and all of this stuff. And then I'd always want to find a way to like bring it full circle. Like, for me and you, we can talk about spiritual things, right? And how does that overlay all of it? So I don't know. That would probably be one thing that I would do, because people are interesting, right? Me and my buddy Frank Armato, one of my best friends,
love him. Sweetheart of a guy.
Before we were married, we go to Perkins and we people watch. After we'd go out, we'd sit down, we'd get a cup of coffee, we talk about life, we talk about girls, we talk about what the future is going to be like, having no idea what it was really going to be like.
Right.
And we would watch people. Sometimes we'd have conversations, one of our other friends would come and sit down. And this is like, to me, what do you say? It's like coffee talk.
Right.
Like, what's going on?
Right.
Right. But at the end of the day, you want viewers to find it interesting.
Sure.
And something they can pull out maybe that's meaningful to them. Good or bad, right? I mean, and maybe you have a guest that like, he walks off and you go, man, that was crazy. That guy's a little crazy,
Sure.
And maybe they say, what do you learn from that? It's not the way I want to be.
Right. Right. Yeah.
What makes Joe Rogan interesting?
His guest list is incredibly diverse, and they're here. At the end of the day, most of his guests don't need an intro. Everybody knows who they are, right? It's a bunch of famous people, because, everyone, you can't compare your podcast to Joe Rogan. You'll quit.
Right. He's a black belt.
He's a black belt.
You're just beginning. You guys are white belts.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is you're learning all of the stuff that one day is going to make you that black belt.
Right.
And I believe that. And that's again, my personality. I'm very optimistic. I'm like, look, ultimately, what's your goal for this? Ultimately, you will be a black belt if you don't. I'm a big believer in life. If you don't quit and you have passion for something, you'll be a black belt. I don't care if it's cooking. I don't care if it's your marriage. I don't care if it's your parenting. I don't care if it's in business.
Right.
If you want to be a black belt in life in something, you can do it.
The key's just not quitting.
The key's not quitting.
That's what Hickson said. Hey, I'm not a black belt. I'm a white belt. Never quit.
I feel that way all the time. And the older I get and the more my body gets beat up, the more you just start saying like, what's my passion and why? Why am I doing this? You know? But it's interesting, and you know, jiu-jitsu has a lot of life lessons and a lot of good stories. You know, I have to give a shout out to Ethan Day and to Jason Bircher, because, you know, the one thing about Steve is he was very tribal about training. He only trained with certain people. Everything kind of passed the Hickson, you know, filter. If it was somebody that he thought, you know, he felt comfortable training with them, it was in his garage.
Right.
We went out one time to a gym and started training at a gym, a couple times maybe, and we didn't really like it. We went back to garage training. Jason and Ethan Day really were primarily responsible for growing Kansas City Jiu-Jitsu in old time, you know, Chad Osborne and others. But Ethan was the one that was always bringing people in from Brazil, you know. So those guys did a lot to grow Kansas City, you know, Jiu-Jitsu, and I give him credit for it. And Jason was a sweetheart. Every time I ever trained with Jason, so what happened was when Steve passed away, I started doing judo again. I couldn't really find myself doing jiu-jitsu without feeling like I was cheating on him. Because he was like clean, but only on the Alio side. Clean is the Carlson mentality.
Right.
He was like, there's a certain way you do jiu-jitsu, and you got to stay true to it. And if not, you know, you're kind of adulterating it. You're diluting it. So I couldn't feel comfortable feeling like I could really go anywhere. So I went to judo for a while, and I said, I'm going to learn how to throw people. I don't want to pull guard. And then I finally started going back to North Kansas City, Chad's place, and Jason was there. And to this day, every time I had ever trained there, and some of his other guys, Josh Littleton and some of those guys, always treat me great.
Yeah.
I got no problems in my mind with anybody in the jiu-jitsu community. It's a big group, a lot of good guys, a lot of guys that grew the sport and affected a lot of people's lives, you know, and I tip my hat to them, you know.
For sure.
A lot of funny stories.
Jason's a good coach. He's very enjoyable to be around. He's witty, he's funny, he's smart. He can train the guy that's trying to win the worlds, and he could train the 46-year-old who just wants to go play and have fun.
And, you know, it's interesting. Jason, like me, he's getting older. He probably has, you know, issues too with injuries and different things like that. And you kind of think, you know, what's my legacy? You know, what am I doing? How long will I do it? I'm going to be 57. How long do I want to keep training, keep coaching? I feel like I can for quite a while, but, you know, at some point, you know, you start looking at, am I handing this over to my guys, my team? Is my son going to take over? You know,
right.
But tons of story. Have I ever told you the Bo Nichols story? Oh my gosh, that's a funny story. So for those in your audience who don't know who Bo Nichols is, he's a world-class wrestler. He's fighting MMA. He's a killer, right? He's a shark. And he's D1 Penn State. I think it was Penn State, multiple, you know, All-American, multiple national championships, you know, and he's just an all-around stud. Well, this is the funniest story in the world. He came to Kansas City, he did a clinic. And this was probably now, I don't think Paul was in high school yet. And he ended up coming and watching our class. Then he ended up coming and training, and I ended up rolling with them.
Oh, God.
He tells the story. It's the funniest story you ever heard in your life. And it's funny how people either remember things or how the fishtail grows or whatever. And the guy's a total stud, right? He's a premier MMA guy right now. But a couple of my friends sent me a link and they go, you got to listen to this. He's talking about the time he trained at your club. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know. So it's a podcast, and they go, so tell us how you got into jiu-jitsu, how you got into MMA. And he goes, man, it was the craziest thing. He goes, I was doing a wrestling clinic, and a guy comes up to me, big guy, it was Brett, and he goes, hey, I just want to thank you. You know, my son was at your clinic, and he goes, but I got to go. He said, I got jiu-jitsu class, and Bo's like, can I watch? He's like, yeah, come on up and watch. And I remember this, so I'm going to kind of weave in and out of the stories of what was in my mind and what happened and how he tells the story. So he gets up there and he's watching, and when he tells the story, he goes, and then the guy, which was Brett, says, you want to roll? Only Brett's crazy enough to ask Bo Nichols if he wants to roll, right? Right. Sure, man, I'll roll. And he goes, you want to put on a gi? And Bo says no. So Brett goes, okay. And when Bo Nichols tells the story, he goes, and this guy takes off his shirt. He's like in a wife beater and his slacks. And I asked Brett about it. He goes, yeah, he wasn't putting on a gi. I wasn't going to. And so they battle, and he tells a story, and he goes, and then I got him. He didn't tap Brett. I think he ended up like riding him. And he goes, and, you know, it was cool. And, you know, we'd gone for a while, and I thought it was, you know, really cool that they asked me. And he's like, and then they go, well, you not yet. You got to go with this guy. Well, first of all, nobody was like, you got to go with this guy. But there were other guys watching and they wanted to roll and he wanted to roll. So he mows through like 3 or 4 guys that are mostly new, white belts. And he's telling the story, and he's like, and so, one by one, and I think the clickbait on it is when Bo Nichols, destroyed a whole group of jiu-jitsu guys or something like that. These are new guys. Guys are shooting on him. Like I'm watching, and I'm like, why would you ever shoot a double leg on Bo Nichols? So he's just sitting there putting him in front headlocks and choking him out. And he's going through one guy after the other, and I'm laughing like, you shoot a double leg on Bo Nichols, right? And he's telling a story, and each match is long, and he's tapping him out, but he's getting tired, but he's doing it. And then he kind of mixes Brett with another guy. There was another guy there that had literally been to like 3 practices, Jake Oberfall. Great guy, was Paul's wrestling coach, big guy, wrestled at NAIA. I think he was maybe honorable mention, All-American or something. He goes, now I'm going with this really big guy, and he wrestles, so I'm a little bit nervous. And he goes, but he was really strong and stuff, but once I got him tired, I ended up, taking his back and choking him out. And we went on, and every match is longer than they were. And, and he's like, so by now I've gone with like 8 guys, probably 5, and I'm like, so now I'm finally done. And so he goes, I start to walk off the mat, and they go, oh no, you got to go with the professor. And this guy looks at me and he says, not yet, you got to go with me. That was me. Okay. I never said that. I never said that. Because I'm watching, I'm like 230 something. My back had been bothering me. I hadn't been training at all. And what happened was I had on my gi, and the wrestling coaches who I really like, all those guys are like, Jesse, go with Bo. I'm like, I'm not going with Bo. And they're like, go with Bo. Come on, man. And then my guys are like, go with Bo. And I'm thinking, I got nothing to gain and nothing to prove. And that's kind of the nice thing at my age is I don't really have the ego anymore. Like, no, I'm not like, oh, I got him in a footlock. I beat Bo Nichols, who's never done jiu-jitsu, or he beat me, and I don't want anybody to know, just nothing stupid like that. So they're like, come on, go with them. And I'm like, whatever, okay, I'll go. So I got it on video. It was probably about 9 minutes, and it was a stalemate. And I'll tell more about that side. But I'm listening to this podcast. He goes, oh no, you got to go with me, which is funny because later on he said I didn't speak English. Okay. He goes, so this guy walks over and he goes, and he's huge. I mean, he's big, like really big, like 275. And I'm like, well, first of all, I've never been over, a little over 230.
Right.
And then he goes, and I don't think he spoke English. I think he was Brazilian. And now I'm laughing. I'm like, man, this story's getting funny, Right. And then he goes, and he was old, like old. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. You might be 19 or 20, but I'm not that old.
Right.
And then he goes, and he had these stripes, like, I don't know, like 9 stripes on his black belt. I'm like, dude, I had like 1, So it was just funny how the story was going. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is funny. And he's like, so the first thing he asked if I want to put on a gi, which I did, because I go, you want to put on a gi? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, I'm leaving mine on. He goes, so he's wearing this outfit, And I'm like, I'm not going to go over and underhooks with Bo Nichols and hand, grips when he's used to all that. At least I'm going to give him a bunch of cloth, Right. And I had no preconceived notion like, oh, I'm going to kill Bo Nichols. Like, everybody's watching. I'm just going to say I trained with him, see how I do. I'm not going to stand up with him at all. So I immediately pull guard. Like I'm not going to do takedowns with Bo Nichols.
Right.
Right. So I get in a half guard. He's telling the story. He goes, and he gets me in what now, I learned is the lockdown.
Right. That's a miserable position.
And I just did that to keep his weight off me. The guy had an incredible base. So I get him in the lockdown, just kind of pulling him off me, playing half guard. And he's like, and he's trying to break my leg. He's trying to rip my knee off. He's telling the story. And
right.
I'm like, no, I'm not.
It feels that way.
I'm just like trying to keep you off me. And then he goes, and then he caught me in a wrist lock. And I actually did. And it was an old man trick, kind of baiting a little bit. And I hit this wrist lock and I had it pretty good. And he just was like going to be tough and ripped out of it. But for the most part, it was just him putting a lot of pressure. He passed my guard at one point and I like turtled and I went to do like a turtle roll and it was like I hit a wall. And I even remember I like yelled out, I go, that's world-class base. Like that guy's not moving anywhere. And it ended up being like, and he's telling the story. He goes, and it was like 13 minutes in the story. And he did say one thing that was true that really made me laugh. He goes, and then he was wheezing. I had him like in a headlock and I was squeezing him and he was wheezing real hard. And I thought, I hope this guy doesn't have a heart attack. And I remembered that because I was so out of shape that mostly I was trying to just not like burn and I was, you know, and you can hear it in the video.
Oh my God. I've been there.
So then, you know, he goes, and this part was true. He's like, everybody just stopped because we kind of hit like a little lull in the match. And I'm like, I'm done, you know? And he goes, he kind of looked at me and everybody's kind of looking around and then they all start clapping. And then he's like, good job. And I'm like, good job, you know? And he's telling the story and he goes, and then he takes his shirt off and hands it to me, which I never did. I would never give a guy my dirty t-shirt, right? And he goes, it was really weird. And these guys are dying laughing. He goes, it was really weird. And which again, like I said, never happened. But the funny thing of the whole story is with how he remembered it. But the cool thing was, he said that was his catalyst to MMA because he tells the guys, he goes, yeah, I was like, that was weird. He goes, but I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, we are tied to Bo Nickal's career in MMA. There was something about him training that he loved.
There you go. What else can you ask for? That's awesome. That's awesome. Can you send that to me?
Which one?
The podcast.
Interview? Yeah.
You got to send that to me. Well, listen, I got to get going. This was awesome.
Thank you.
This was awesome. I'm so glad you were able to come on. I'd like to have you come on again and you know, dive in. There's a lot of other things I would like to dive into with you, you know, particularly from spiritual components, from, you know, political components, you know, that, you know, here we've been on for like an hour.
Oh, we could coffee talk for another 2.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
And you were gracious because I was monologuing.
Not really. I wanted to hear it. That's why I had you on. But there's other things that I definitely wish that we had time to talk about. But anyway, you know, I think the world of you.
Love you, buddy. Yeah.
I love you. Love your family. You're part of the reason why I am the way I am today. Why I coach the way I coach. Why the father the way I father, and the husband I am to my wife. And I owe a lot to you. And I love you. I'm
humbled by that. I love you too. I know you've been through a lot in life, you and your family, you know, and the one thing I really admire about you is that you've been able to maintain your faith. And faith is ethereal, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Think about that for a minute. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Hope is not substance, and yet it's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Well, if you can't see it, how's it evidence?
Right.
Right. But somehow faith is hanging on when you're your most miserable, you're most hurt. And I guess if I could say anything too to your listening audience, like I can tell you, I told you that story earlier. God is real. I heard the voice of God. God found me. And no matter what, whoever's listening, no matter what your situation is, if you reach out to God, he said, if you draw near to me, I will draw near to you. It's a promise. If you reach, he said, if you seek me, when you seek me with all your heart, you will find me.
Right.
Don't give up hope. Just know that sometimes the hard things in life, the pain, the hurt, it will serve a purpose. Like a muscle that's torn down, you can grow back stronger.
Right.
That's all I have to say.
Amen.
Love you, buddy.
Love you.